Burton Equation. This mod tells the story of Detective Zachary Burton as he goes through different time periods to catch his nemesis Fabrine while taking down his goons along the way. It's a very interesting premise and I've been looking forward to covering this for a while now. Before making this video, I checked online to see what people thought about it, and honestly, I saw a lot of bipolar opinions. Some praised the mod for its uniqueness, some outright disliked the mod entirely. This was odd to see, especially the uber critical opinions. Surely it's not that bad. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Kralik for the stuff he's done in regards to source modding. I mean, he's the lead on RTBR, and I loved his other mod, Goreagulation, that came out a few years ago. Surely the Burton Equation would be up there as well, right? I played it, and I have a few opinions, I guess. Rather than doing my typical style of going through the game from start to finish while I talk about it, I'll do the simpler thing and talk about what I really liked and what I didn't.
Sometimes the places we know the most are the places we like the least. I'm Zachary Burton, police detective.
The thing I liked the most about this was that you get to go through levels that take place in different eras. There's the Roaring 20s, the World War II 40s, the neon bright 80s, and the modern era, or the HL2 era. Each chapter has a unique style of color grading. The 20s was black and white, the 40s was in sepia, the 80s was this bright oversaturated type, and the modern one was normal. Though I will say in some parts, the 80s lighting effects do start to strain the eyes a little, especially when you're looking at a bright light source, but each era having its own color grading was a nice touch. But that's not the only thing unique. Each era has its own unique style of landscapes and props and models. Like in the 20s, you'll see Art Deco style architecture in the 3D skybox, era accurate cars and trucks, while the 40s has the trenches, World War II era props, fighter planes flying above in the sky, and so on. What I also liked was how most of the mod uses stock Half-Life 2 textures for the most part, even in the 20s and 80s. That shows the versatility of the mappers and how well they can utilize textures originally meant for a completely different style of architecture. And with that, the overarching presentation was decent too. You got these comic panels and voice acting for both the detective and Fabrine. The comic panels vary in quality, to be honest. Some of them look pretty good, and some of them are alright looking. My favorite was the one where the detective is literally Humphrey Bogart. Nice touch. With the presentation also comes the music. You got old-timey music in the 20s, synths in the 80s, and techno in the modern era. But I found it a little odd that I was in the middle of a grisly war in the 40s, but the background music was so jolly and happy.
Whatever time of day that takes your fancy. Here in Chicago, what we've got for you is the news of the day.
My boys are already laying out the welcome mat.
I know why his name's plastered all over the place.
Maybe a soundtrack from the early COD games or even the Commandos games would fit the 40s better, I think. On top of that, both Zachary and the antagonist Fabrine are voiced. Zachary's voice acting is done in this tough as nails kind of guy, a mix of maybe Max Payne and Solid Snake mixed in with some Irish accent. Well, the Irish accent is kinda hearable in the beginning, but later on it's not there.
Sure enough, as soon as the fire started raging, everything went white again. There's somebody watching me. Maybe it's that woman from the letter. In any case, it's something I don't understand.
Fancy seeing you here, detective. I warned you about having the stones to see this through, Boynton. It's bigger than you'll ever realize. Time to die.
Then Fabrine is like a stereotypical 1920s mobster persona, which you used to see in like cartoons like Looney Tunes, which I think most people might not like, but I think it fits the overarching story. Then there's the bad guys, the Metro Gang in the 1920s, and I guess their later evolutionary descendants. It's basically Metro cops, but with different clothing on in each of the era. In the 1940s, I like the touch where their radio speaks German instead of English. Let's get to the weapons. If you've played RTBR, you'll know how amazing Kralik and his team are at creating the 3D models, the animations, and the overall feel of the weapons. Here is the same story. We got the detective's default weapon, the revolver, which was my favorite. Then each era has its own pistol, like a semi-auto, a Luger, a Glock, and a USP. And out of these, the Luger sounds a little too thin, but all of them feel great. But the Glock though, it seems like its bullet spread is overblown, so it's impossible to hit enemies even from a medium distance. But apart from that, the animations were top notch and really well done. Then we get a Tommy gun, a modified Tommy gun, an MP40, a Mag-10, a MP7, and the OICW. All great, all well animated. Then there's also variants of the rocket launcher as well, and later we get grenades. You might have noticed that something's missing, and unfortunately I'll talk about that in the negative section of this video. Lastly, there's the polish. The whole thing is well made and you can see the polish, the care to the little things in the overall product. It shows it was made by experienced developers. I didn't come across any bugs or issues in my playthrough and managed to finish it in around 2 hours. I did die a few times in between, but that's a skill issue, not a mod issue. The mod feels refined when you're playing through it, and from what I see, a patch came out that balanced the gameplay and fixed some bugs. So good to see that. Unfortunately, now we come to the negative side of things. Most of what I'm about to say is honest feedback, which I hope is also constructive criticism. A major problem that I have with this game is the repetition. The problem isn't that the gameplay loop is just you keep shooting people till the cows come home. The problem is that the gameplay loop isn't wide enough to include more things. The game does have breaks in between the shooting where you have to find a fuse or a key or a valve or go through vents, but that's it. I feel like the lack of any other unique character becomes a downfall as well. You have the protagonist, the antagonist Fabrine, and a mystery damsel that starts off this whole story. We get to see the damsel in a way how we see the G-Man, like I saw her in the 20s, then in the 40s as well, and I'm sure she was in the 80s and the modern era too, but I didn't see her. So she's this character that's more than what she's showing, but she doesn't have much of a role apart from that. We see her right at the end when the game ends, but that's it. Having one additional character akin to Barney or Alex or Kleiner would have added variety, someone for the player to look forward to, work with, help out, or get help from. But because there's nothing like that, all the player does is just shoot people 90% of the time. You know, it would have been nice to see some sort of like puzzle, maybe a physics puzzle or some sort of wire puzzle, anything like that.
There ain't nothing in this world that explains what I saw here today. Stands to reason. Whatever's helping him must be out of this world. I never saw that woman again. Maybe she was just trying to push me in the right direction, or maybe she's even one of them.
This repetition falls into some of the map design too. The 20s and the modern era do have unique locations, 2-3 different types of areas you'll be going through, but honestly my least favorite was the skyscraper in the 1980s and the trenches in the 1940s. I don't want to go into too much detail because that'll be, ironically, repetitive of me saying the same thing again and again. Look, the maps are amazing in terms of visuals, but the issue is that there's nothing to keep it fresh. You can only shoot people in the trenches or the skyscraper floors for so long before you start getting bored. In terms of freshness, I think the modern era City 17 was the best out of them all, because there you got like apartments, alleys, streets, the Combine Nexus, and each of these locations have subtypes of how they look. Like an alley will have a small open area in it with benches, or how the apartments differ in looks. A skyscraper is a difficult thing to make interesting if you're using that for a whole chapter. What I was thinking was that you would exaggerate the hell out of it. A casino on one of the floors, add an IT office floor, add a bar, add a spa, add a pool area, anything. Just anything that would make the player go, whoa, that's different. Then there's the lack of enemy types. For the most part, you'll be shooting Metro cops who are equipped with a stun stick, a pistol, or an SMG. In the last 2 chapters, only do the shotgunners show up. There's also hunters and manhacks too, and the last chapter has basically all the Combine units like the soldiers and the elites, so that covers the whole enemy cast. I'll talk about Fabrine in a bit separately. So, in Half-Life modding, there's 2 sides to enemy encounters. Half-Life 1, you fight aliens, you fight the HECU. 2 different types that work in different ways. Half-Life 2, same story. Aliens? Combines. The thing in this game is that there's a whole side missing for a good chunk of the game, but on the contrary, I can't really think of a way to include zombies and headcrabs in the first 3 eras. They do show up in the last era, obviously. So, what this results in is a one-way experience. Sure, the experience is greatly improved when hunters are introduced, manhags come in, or even when the landmines enter the scene. So this enemy type dilemma is something I feel like a lot of people will have a problem with. I didn't want to include this point in the script, but man, why is the shotgun missing for the first half of the game? The shotgunners appear in the middle of the 3rd chapter, the 1980s, and that's when you get your hands on it. And I gotta say, this is one hell of an awesome shotgun, super punchy and smoothly animated. But I really wish that, like the other era-specific weapons, that something like a 1897 Winchester would have shown up in the 20s and 40s. It would have made the fights, especially with the hunters, much more fun. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the final boss battle with Fabrine. This is more of a skill issue on my end than the game's issue, but goddamn is the final boss battle hard as balls. Fabrine will shoot you fast and he will move around the map even faster, all the while his goons spawn in to help him. I don't have good reaction times, at least not anymore, so it feels very overwhelming. A player who's good at FPS games might fare better in this boss battle, but for me, on normal difficulty, this was impossible. Overall, I think this is a good mod, but didn't quite tap into the potential it had. To be honest with you, even though it's a simple mod to explain, I still had a very rough time trying to write this script for the video. Do I call it a bad mod? No, it's not a bad mod, but I can't just take the positive approach and just say shooting differently clothed metro cops for 2 hours is the mark of a masterpiece. I really wish there was more to the story, more to the depth of the worlds, more to the way each era plays out, and a little bit more refinement in the gameplay. Visually, there's nothing wrong with this mod because it looks great. It's polished as a polished mod can be. The confusion is only with the gameplay side of things. One thing I didn't add to either the positive or the negative is the story. The way it's handled is something I think would be a subjective opinion. I like the mystery aspect to it, like how Zachary, or we, the player, don't know what's the deal with the time traveling thing. But at the end, I was really hoping for the damsel to say something like, "Oh, that was me, I was doing that," or something like that would give a hint as to the why. Just a little bit of closure about why we're jumping in and out of different time periods. All we have to go on is that Fabrine is a bad dude and we have to kill him. But yeah, to summarize it, like I said, it's a good mod with a lot of untapped potential. Do check it out if you're in the mood for something unique visually. And if you have already played this, then go check out Krolik's other mod, Goreagulation. It's a very bloody and gory kind of experience. That's all for this one. Thanks so much for watching, and a big thanks and shout out goes to these beautiful benefactors for supporting the channel. You watching the videos and supporting the channel gives me the motivation to make more videos like these. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.